Hey, everybody, I'm Aslan Hajvandi. I'm Director of Digital Media for Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. That fine gentleman over there is Ira Schoffel, Managing Editor of Warchant.com. Hit the thumbs up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are locked and loaded this week. It's ACC meetings over in Amelia Island, Florida, which is where Ira joins us from. Ira, thank you so much for taking time out of what was a busy day on Monday. I don't know if we're really expecting so much news to be flying around on the early part of this sort of week-long sojourn you'll be having out there at Amelia Island. But plenty of news broke down here. We'll talk about all of it here. The video is now here on YouTube. Check out the story that's affiliated with it over at warchant.com. So Ira did see a tweet out there by Pete Thamel. This was something that maybe had been in the works for a little bit. We saw it a little bit right in 2020 with the COVID short season, but divisions in the conference being dissolved. That was something up for discussion today. Is that something that could really happen, you think, in the ACC divisions, going by the wayside and just bundling everybody up and taking the top two guys for conference titles?
I mean, it definitely seems like there's a push in that direction. And I guess the NCAA Division I Council is supposed to officially vote on that, whether or not that's an option, whether or not conferences can get rid of divisions and still have a championship game, because that was the reason, obviously, in the 90s for the SEC, but in the 2000s, 2005 for the ACC, why they set up divisions in the first place was because you had to have them to have a conference championship game. It seems like there's a lot of momentum to make that change. Part of the reason is there's just, I don't know, just they need some variety in scheduling. Just the fact that some of these teams in the ACC don't face off against their players, and I know this is something coaches have been complaining about for several years. There are teams in this conference that a player can come in, sign with a school, play for 4 or 5 years, and never play at one of the schools in the conference. So one of the positives to doing this, where you maybe only have 2 or 3 permanent partners, and then everybody else kind of rotates, as you would get these other teams at least in your home stadium once every 4 years, which would be positive for recruiting. It would be positive for a lot of reasons, variety, and then also flexibility with scheduling outside the conference. So I think that's what they're going to do. Nobody definitively knows. I talked to Michael Alford, FSU's athletic director, about it, and said that they're still looking at several models. I think Pete Thamel mentioned 2 primary models, but Michael Alford and also Graham Neff, the Clemson AD, and others said that they're looking at a bunch of different options, and they still may not make a change at all. But I do think the fact that they're at least discussing it. When John Swafford was the AD, every year we would come here to Amelia Island and ask him if there's any possibility of changing the divisions, and he would always say, "Oh, there's no interest. None of the schools have any interest in not only even changing the divisions, like mixing them up, getting Florida State and Georgia Tech in the same division." He would every year would say, "Oh, there's no interest at all." Well, sure enough, here we are, first year without him as the commissioner, and Jim Phillips is the new commissioner back in the ACC meetings, and they're talking about possibly even scrapping divisions. We'll see how it plays out.
Anything that assures us of, Duke, BC, Syracuse shuffling here in Tallahassee once every 2-3 years will go over well, I'm sure, with the fan base. But, again, it would be cool to have Georgia Tech more in the rotation, right, and, some matchups in the conference title game that we maybe would be rematches that we've not seen. So that's truly an interesting thing that could be developing. Also, Ira, I'm probably as guilty about it as anybody that has a podcast or a show or does anything on YouTube, but conflating too much of NIL as being a bad thing, the name, image, and likeness, as we've seen it kind of blow up here ever since it became the rule of law back in July in the summer. There's good NIL, and there's NIL, I guess, that a lot of administrators aren't happy about. The NIL, what we thought about autograph signings, jerseys, things like that, I think everybody was on board with, but it's clearly now, as I think Sports Illustrated released some documentation from the NCAA, they've had now about 10 months or so to figure out how this NIL looks. And with the pay-for-play inducements kind of becoming more synonymous with that acronym, it sounds like the NCAA might have teeth and they want to show them off. Is it saber-rattling, as you kind of mentioned in a story earlier this week, or does it seem like the feeling around there in Amelia Island, talk to administrators, that the NCAA really is going to be able to enforce and has a desire to enforce NIL pay-for-play sort of guardrails?
You definitely get the sense here from talking to people that there was a desire for the NCAA to at least do this. Like they're glad that the NCAA came out and at least said, yes, we are going to try to enforce something. We are going to try to do something. That's half the battle. They haven't gotten that half in the first, like you said, the first 8 months of 10 months of this. Now they want to see the other half of the battle. The schools, the conference officials, athletic directors, football coaches that are here, they want to see something actually happen. Obviously, Pitt's coach Narduzzi is here, and he didn't want to talk to the media, but he's obviously somebody that everybody wants to hear his opinion because he just had a star receiver, Jordan Addison, go into the portal and seems to be at a bidding war, and there's allegations of tampering there. So that's, people want to, even at this level, they want to know, is the NCAA actually going to actually do anything, or is this just more just talking? So I think, again, there was a positive reaction to the fact that the NCAA at least said they're going to do something. Now everybody's kind of in a wait and see mood. But just judging from conversations we've had on and off the record from people here, I talked to Mike Norvell and Mike Alford. I have a story that'll be running there, and I talked to some other people in the conference as well who are here this week. And they just want to see the NCAA actually do something, because if they don't, there's just a concern that these rosters and these people the tampering will not even begin to stop, and the illicit recruiting inducements is just going to get higher and higher.
For you, are you surprised in talking to people on the record? And maybe you obviously can't mention the stuff that's been off the record, but are you surprised to maybe hear that administrators, maybe, I don't know if Mike Norvell said explicitly, but that there seems to be a little bit of a favorable opinion about there being enforcement of the pay for play inducements kind of being more, regulated, if you will?
Just, Mike Norvell did say that there's been a couple instances where they've had players, come to him and say that they've, basically had overtures from not necessarily other schools directly, but players that are on Florida State's roster have been approached about the possibilities of opportunities elsewhere. So it's something they're all concerned about. And at the end of the day, some schools out there are doing it. I mean, obviously, there's no denying it's happening. But nobody is going to want it to happen to them. So they do want, there's nothing the schools can do about it. So they need somebody to. And I think what you're seeing right now is they're turning up the heat on the NCAA and saying, okay, if you want to be an active institution, if you want to exist, then you have to do something about this. If you're not going to do anything about it, we'll figure out a different, and this isn't coming from Mike Norvell and Mike Alford, I just get this is the sense of things is, okay, if you're not going to do anything about it, NCAA, that's fine. You could go away with your $1 million salaries. We're going to create another organization where we can put some things into place. So I think that's where it's at. I think they're looking to the NCAA to say, if you're not going to do anything, that's fine, then we'll move on. And it seems like this is the NCAA's last chance to try to make something happen. Whether or not they can actually do anything, it's anybody's guess. I mean, I don't know if you read the statement. I'm sure you probably did, but I mean, it's how would you define any of that stuff? They're not going to go back after every case, but they're going to look after the most outrageous cases. It's like, how do you define what's an outrageous case and what's not? I mean, all of this seems so nebulous. And then you get into, collectives, I guess, can still exist, but they can't be involved in the recruiting process. Okay, well, you're back to where you were at square one. When does it constitute part of the recruiting process, or when is it a deal after you've already signed? And so I don't know, man. I don't know how anybody's going to enforce it, but I definitely get the impression here that people want the NCAA to do something.
Yeah, I like how it says NIL agreements must be based on an independent case-by-case analysis of the value that each athlete brings to the agreement.
Right, and what that was one of the conversations that I had with somebody at a different school today. He's just like, how do you define the market value in Tallahassee versus Pittsburgh versus Miami versus? I mean, how do you do any of this? I don't know, man. I don't think anything's been solved. But like I said, I do think that there's a desire on the behalf of a lot of coaches and ADs that to something maybe could happen, just because they're very concerned about where it's going.
Yeah, the NCAA, I mean, there's everyone's got some skin in this game and something to lose. I mean, like you said, George Kliavkoff, I think from the Pac-12 was talking about the NCAA doesn't want to do anything. They'll figure things out. They'll make their own sort of governing body because, all right, they'll leave the NCAA to go ahead and, run the championships for beach volleyball and golf and the Olympic sports. But if they take away football and they take away basketball, then the NCAA, if the NCAA loses those sports, I mean, they lose a lot of their salaries and everything too. So everyone's got some investment to want to fix this and get everything right with each other. So, all right, man, that was just Monday, Ira. You're going to be out there all week. What else do we kind of have sort of on tap maybe or thinking is going to be on the agenda for the rest of the week moving forward out there at Amelia Island?
Yeah, so the way it works is they meet by group. Like, so the football coaches met today, the ADs met today, The basketball coaches, I think, will be here tomorrow. The men's and women's basketball coaches, they'll meet as a group, and then they come together with the ADs and have meetings. So that process will go over the next couple of days. Then by Wednesday, they should have some decisions on some of these things. So we'll hear more about that by then. But obviously more big topics. The transfer portal was a big topic today among the football coaches. They're trying to figure out maybe there could be windows of time where maybe the transfer portal is open for this week and it's not open for 365 days. So that's something that's up for debate. The ACC may come out with an opinion on what they want to see, and then they'll forward that up to the other conferences in the NCAA. I think the revenue gap in the ACC is a big topic that there's not going to be any kind of decision here this week. But I think Jim Phillips, as the new AD, is going to have to be talking to all the different ADs and coaches about the revenue gap between the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC, and what the conference is doing about it to try to shrink that gap and make this league more competitive with the other leagues. So, I think the competitive aspect of the ACC is something they're going to be talking about as well. So, we'll have coverage tomorrow, and then also on Wednesday as they wrap up the meetings. The meetings will actually wrap up on Thursday, but the commissioner is going to speak on Wednesday with any official votes that they make.
It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next, 36 hours or so before he makes that speech. I can't imagine just how fast Jim Phillips' head is spinning right about now. It's been his first media sort of week out there at the meeting. So Ira Schoffel's guys covered out there all week long. He'll also be on the Jeff Cameron Show, which goes 1 to 3 o'clock right here on Warchant TV, as well as 93.3 FM over the air in Tallahassee, Florida. Ira, we'll catch up with you tomorrow, man. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Aslan.